You're watching Face to Face. I'm your host, Tim Vince, and I'm thrilled to be joined by a Dr. Jonathan Oloyede, correct? An apostolic missionary. What a blessing.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that really does describe your life since I've known you anyway. You really have a strategic outreach, which I've been impressed with since I probably could be up to 20 years.
Yeah. I think it was years ago when you said I came to talk about the Global Day of Prayer.
That's it, exactly.
And that was 2006, 2007 when we started that.
Yeah.
So
we're definitely going to talk about some of that stuff. But what I always ask folk is, how did you come to know the Lord? And don't tell me it was when you were born, because you were born into Islam apparently. So yes. I'm interested in all of that. Let's hear a little bit of the background.
My parents came here between 59 and 70, had 3 boys and a girl. I was the third boy. I'm not going to go into that because I would just divert our whole conversation. Yeah. But my mom was expecting me to be a girl.
Oh, wow.
And I was another boy. So you can just imagine. And then we went back to Nigeria in 1970. And that was a time when a lot of Nigerians were coming here, getting their papers in terms of certificates and degrees. My parents trained to be psychiatric nurses and did some diplomas in marketing and other disciplines. And then when we got back, the family prevailed on my dad after letting them kind of loose for a few years and said, you guys are Muslims, we're Muslims, you need to come to the mosque.
And that was here in the UK?
That was in Nigeria.
Oh, in Nigeria, okay.
Yeah, so we spent 11 years here. I was 3 when we went back. I don't think my parents were religious while they were here. They were just, slugging things out and, making a living and getting ready to go back. But when we got back to Nigeria was when the wider family in the global south, we lived by communities, extended family structures. And so the extended family structure prevailed on our nuclear family and said, you need to...
And if it is Islamic, then
yes.
You basically, you're in it and
yes.
you follow the rules.
Yes, you follow the identity of your community.
Yeah.
And my dad came home one day and said, we're all going to be going to the mosque. There was no conversation, there was no debate. We just had to go. And I got involved in the mosque. I remember I was maybe just 11 then or thereabout, or even younger. I'm trying to remember at that time when we started going to the mosque. But when I became a teenager, I kind of had a bit of a crisis of faith, I may call it, or a point in my Islamic journey of faith where I began to ask the question, why doesn't Allah speak to us? So I asked my mom, discussed with my parents, and they couldn't give me a definitive answer. And she had to call in the Imam.
Yeah.
In fact, she actually called in my uncle first, who was a very devout Muslim. Got him to speak to me, but he couldn't give me any answers. So she called in the Imam, which is the equivalent of a pastor in the Islamic faith. And I said, why doesn't Allah speak to us? And the summary of their responses were, we have the Quran and we have the Prophet. We have to get on with it. So Islam is very instructional. It's very rigid. It's very, I won't use the word legalistic, but it is legalistic. And it's very disciplinary in its approach. So you just follow the rules. Even the way we pray in the mosque is you follow the sequence of the person in front of you. The women sit to one side, the men sit to another side. Yeah.
It's an interesting background for you. Then did you come back to the UK to study? Because you studied, the medical.
Yes. So
degree.
I go into medical school all in Nigeria.
Okay.
Yeah. So I went to university to study medicine, and the day I was leaving, the night before I was leaving, my dad said to me, don't marry an Ijebu girl and don't become a Christian. So an Ijebu means like saying to a Cockney family, please don't marry a Scouser.
Yes.
or a Geordie, something like that. Something, I'm just, using those terminologies. But those are kind of rival tribes. And the university was in that region of Nigeria, in the south. And I remember getting to medical school and meeting this interesting group of people who kept saying, God spoke to me, God spoke to me, God said this. And that got my attention, because I thought, Allah doesn't speak, so how does God speak to you? And we got into some very interesting conversations.
And you're going to be able to answer that soon about how God speaks to you, because you felt around that time, that you came to Christian faith, and then you felt called to actually serve in the church.
Yes, so just cutting a long story short, I'll summarize this in just a minute or two. I walked into their church because they used to have these prayer meetings from 12 to 5 in the morning. And as I walked in and sat down, God began to speak to me. And he said, receive my son, Jesus. And I said, Lord, I've been asking you to speak to me all my life. And the first place you could speak to me is in a church. And the Lord said, receive my son, Jesus. So I worked to the front. After I saw people going to the front. Most chaotic meeting I've ever been to. Men and women sitting together, just went to the front and they said, what do you want? I said, I want Jesus. They said, you want to become a Christian? I said, no. So they put me to a side because they didn't know what to do with me, because my dad had said, don't become a Christian. But I said I wanted Jesus because God had said, receive my son Jesus.
Excellent.
So somebody said, okay, you want Jesus? Okay, we'll give you Jesus. And they introduced me to Jesus, and Tim, I had this spiritual explosion. I began to speak in a different language, some language I didn't understand, and they explained it to me when I received Jesus. And that was how I became a Christian.
That's amazing. So from completely out in the cold, suddenly you're impacted. And you were around...
I was 19. Teens. I was 18, 19 then. Yeah.
And so you carried on in your studies.
Yes. And
you became a doctor.
I became a doctor, and I basically wanted to go to northern Nigeria as a missionary doctor.
Right.
I already got an appointment in a lovely missionary hospital, Baptist Missionary Hospital in the north, in Jos, Plateau State. And I came here to visit my sister on a 3-month holiday. I'm still on my 3-month holiday since 1991.
Wow.
Because I came thinking Britain was the Mecca of modern Christianity. And I just discovered people were not going to church. They lived the way they wanted to. The newspapers were full of all kinds of,
it's a bit of a shock,
stuff.
Isn't it?
It was a culture shock. And so I went to the Lord in prayer. By this time, I developed a relationship with God, because I said to him, he'll be my God on one condition: he'll speak to me every day, deal or no deal. And he would speak to me through the scriptures, speak to me through dreams and revelations. And so I asked him, what's going on? And he began to show me over a season. He visited me in dreams, and I saw 1 or 2 visions, Tim, about the coming revival. And he said, these were the exact words he said to me. He said, you're not here by accident, you're here by divine design. You are here as part of my recruitment to this part of the world in preparation for the coming of my son Jesus. Drop your agenda and pick up my program.
That's excellent.
And
that is quite something, isn't it?
Yeah. And I realized...
3-month trip.
I know. I realized that this my 3-month trip was actually a missionary journey. And the Lord wanted me to take part in what he was going to do in this part of the world. He used the word this part of the world. So my calling is not just to Britain or to England. It's this part of the world, to the West. But most of my focus has been the UK and Ireland. That's where I feel the Lord has called me. And
so that when you came for your 3 months, what were we talking about, early 90s?
91.
Okay, that's a good guess.
August 91, August 4th, 1991.
So there's just been a revolution, hasn't there, since then? I mean, the country was a shock then, but just imagine if you'd have turned up today and
I know, because
changes.
My friends and colleagues from university, there were a few of them here already, have started this wonderful fellowship. And we used to meet on a Friday evening. And that was where the young people came, many of them from Nigeria. And then it became a church, and then it exploded in numbers. And We started doing church from 92, 93.
Wow.
The church, it became a church, and before we knew it, we were 1,000, then we were 2,000. And within that time, I got married.
Long before the Global Day of Prayer,
Yes.
you were used to big numbers. Because it's something that you have in the Nigerian community is big churches, whereas in other communities, you're lucky, if I can use the term, to have 100.
I think it's something about the Nigerian DNA.
Yeah.
Because Nigeria is the largest black country in the world, that's a
Yeah.
fact. And there's 200 million of us in that space. And I think that's where the grace of God has come to hit the Nigerian nation, whereby many of us are coming to faith in God, and we just gather in big numbers, large numbers.
The interesting thing is that probably late 90s, I went to one of these big events at the Excel, all-night prayer meetings.
Okay.
And for me, it was just fantastic, because I sort of spent about 10 years preaching to a few, faithful few, and to see tens of thousands committed with their families, with babies in prams,
Yes.
praying through the night,
Yes.
and taking authority.
Yeah.
All the things that burn in my heart, to see a whole hall full of people, it is inspiring.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah. And that was part of what God showed me concerning Britain.
Yeah.
There's going to come a time when there's going to be an awakening. I saw it in dream and vision format. And the first time I shared this with some English national leaders, they said, "Do you know about Jean Darnell?" And there's a vision of somebody called, I said, "Who's Jean?"
Yeah.
And they showed me the vision. It was very similar
That's right.
to my vision of life. God showed me people praying and joining together in prayer meetings all over the British Isles, including Ireland. And as they prayed, the whole meeting that they were meeting was lit up with like a Christmas tree, with a ball of fire, and the whole nation lit up like a Christmas tree. And the words healing and light were written across the nation. And I knew I was seeing the future of the nation, that it's going to come a time when the substance of the Lord's Prayer, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, will be fulfilled in this land, and many are going to come to Jesus.
That's quite a vision, isn't it? Because when you had that vision, you had seen some growth in your church,
Yes.
but that's like, as you say, a kind of explosion.
Yes.
Of,
So my first 10 years, 91 to 2001, was like in my black community, growing church, getting married, having kids. And then the next 10 years from 2001 to 2011 was kind of exposure to the wider Christian community, connecting and sharing my vision. And then the Lord told me to share my vision and put it within the framework of the Global Day of Prayer, which was, we started out of South Africa then.
Yeah.
And the leader said, "No, we can't go to a stadium." I said, "God said we should do a stadium event."
I do remember when you first shared it, and I sort of try and, lacking in faith, try and sort of clock up what that would cost. And I've done some big things in my time, because with Rev TV we took nearly 1,000 people to Israel, and
Wow.
so there's a bit of pressure on things like that.
Yeah.
You think, well, am I going to get arrested or something if I don't pay the bills? But that was on another scale, and it was the Wembley Stadium,
Yes.
wasn't it?
So we did the West Ham first.
Okay.
West Ham, and then we did Millwall.
Yeah.
So it was at Millwall that Boris Johnson, who was the
right.
mayor then, came to his first public meeting.
Wow.
And was being prayed for by Simon Hughes, who was a Lib Dem MP.
Yeah.
And on the other side was Stephen Teams, a Labour MP.
Yeah.
And Boris Johnson was in the middle, Tory.
So you've learnt a few tricks then.
So, it wasn't orchestrated. It was just,
No, that's
it just
good.
kind of just happened.
No, they're three well-known, well, when I say three, those other two you mentioned have been well-known Christians in the Christian community for years. But for Boris to pop up was quite something, I think.
I know. He was fascinated with the numbers, with the vision.
Yeah.
He came twice to the National Day of Prayer at West Ham. Second time we did it. And then we went to Wembley. And that was another. So we did about 5 stadium events.
And and we can talk about the detail of what prayer does, but what were you specifically targeting in prayer at these events?
It was to ignite a passion for prayer and unity.
Okay.
For the church to go back to the book of Acts and begin to pray and seek God's face and have a breakthrough like in the book of Acts.
Yeah.
And that was the spirit of it, because if the church begins to pray, she will begin to hear God speak. Right. And when she begins to hear God speak and obey, God's words, and if acted upon, will bring about an awakening. It's just simple biblical maths.
Exactly, it is, isn't it? It's a spiritual logic.
Yes.
If you spend time in God's presence.
Yes.
Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
And so I think it was around 2010, or was it earlier when did you do West Ham?
So West Ham was 2007.
Okay.
First West Ham was 2007. Okay. Millwall was 2008.
Yeah.
Then we went back to West Ham in 2010. Yeah. And then we went to Wembley in 2012.
Yeah. And meanwhile, our country's going through a revolution. Oh. And we had the credit crunch.
Yes.
So there's quite a lot of dramatic things happening.
Yes.
But nothing like what we've got now. I mean, we're on the tipping point of like a complete, it's like the tectonic plates are shifting in the world.
I know. And I think that's part of what the prophetic role of the church is. I think the church is supposed to be a light that shines and provokes those in leadership to act out the will of God for the nation. I think many in this nation and those in leadership want to turn this nation into what the Bible in Matthew 25 and 24 calls a goat nation. Yeah. She doesn't want to obey God anymore. She wants to walk away from the Lord. Yeah. And I think it's the church that can keep her, restrained, as it were, within His will. And that's part of the role of a praying church.
Now, the interesting thing is, if you take out the amazing growth in the Nigerian church and what we call the black majority churches, the traditional churches have generally dwindled. What we call the mainstream. I don't want to be too pejorative and the like, but they. Meanwhile, this Islamic community that you experienced in your youth has been growing consistently over here, to an extent that it's a political force, and of course it's a spiritual force. With all of your experience and your experience in Christian leadership over decades now, how do you read the situation properly? Not only here, because it's a world, we're living in a digital world now. Not only here, but obviously in Nigeria, in the Middle East. What is going on in the spiritual realm?
So, from the natural point of view, Islam is a culture. It's a religious movement. It's a political movement. It's a way of life, which is different from the definition of many white Christians that talk about faith. This country, years ago in the 17th and 18th century, Christianity was political, it was religious, it was cultural, it was a way of life. It was not just we went to church. Everything we touched, our social reforms, the way we took care of children, the legal structures, everything was infused. Even when I go into Parliament, there's Psalm 133 written. It infused everything. And I think the Muslim and Islamic community are reminding Britain of what she used to be with her faith. And I believe that with the right prods, positive and sometimes the prophetic nudge of the church, a nation can awake to her true identity. Islam's agenda is to make everybody on the planet Muslim. So if a Muslim looks at you, he will say, you're supposed to be Muslim. What they mean by that is you're supposed to follow the tenets of the Prophet Islam, the Prophet Muhammad, as they call him, and the Quran. And that is what they believe. So what?
So this is really interesting because after 9/11, the Western world decided to implement a kind of secular humanist, religious framework to try and manage all the religious forces that are out there. And so that's become like another very strong, progressive, liberal, marching band.
It was a wrong decision.
Yeah.
It's almost like saying, because you have visitors, you get rid of all your family photos.
Yes.
So nobody knows who you are.
Exactly.
It's
exactly what we've done.
Because we don't want to offend anyone.
Yes.
No, you're coming to my home. I'm going to be hospitable, but this is who I am. And you have to abide by my rules.
Yeah.
Because when we go over to the Middle East, that is exactly what how we are treated.
And not only what you've said, but they come into them and think, well, this home needs sort of bit of decoration, so they start putting their family pictures up and they take over the home.
Precisely, because there are no pictures on the wall, so let's put some up.
Yeah. And now it's the case that you've got to bow down to our pictures. And so it's amazing inversion now of our, what I would say was our Judeo-Christian culture is now hard to find.
Yeah, many Muslims mean well. I was teaching this in our church the other day.
By the way, I wasn't meaning that about the Muslims. I was meaning it about the secular humanists.
I know.
They're the ones who seem to be just...
I know. But you see, the thing about Islam is that when you've grown up seeing your dad pray 5 times a day, you've seen your parents do that, you will follow because you are being visually mentored, visually discipled by a structure and a system that becomes part of you. I ask Christian dads, when was the last time your child saw you praying? You need to pray at home. Your children need to see you lead in your home in a Christian. By
the way, I believe totally in that, and I think that Christian parents should be educating their children as well. And that's a great lack. Even if there's a school, the parents should be intimately involved in what their kids are learning at school. That would change.
I do. Schools. I believe. And so that's why we did our prayers. That's why we've been building a prayer altar to remind the church and to get the church united at the altar to pray and bring this nation back to the altar, back to the cross of Christ.
And you've also been, when I'm going on to another question, it's not because I'm not interested, it's just the time clock. The other thing you've been interested in and working in is the workplace. And how to share your faith and be more outreaching.
Yes.
Just share a bit about your shining the light.
I believe every Christian has Christ in them. And he said, I am the light of the world. And in Matthew 5:13 and 14, he says, you are the light. He doesn't say you are a light. He says you are the light of the world. And I believe that every Christian, if they stand up in the strength, the power, and the identity of Christ in them, they will shine their light. So this song that says, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. It's a lovely song, but it's not biblical. Because your light is not little. The light you're carrying is Christ in you. And so we're trying to tell everyone to put on their lights. Last time we did, the first time we did Shine Your Light, we were able to have 70,000 believers onto the streets and in their workplace. And the following year, which we did it, we went well over 100,000 people. Wow. We hoped that those people will reach at least 1 million on the streets. And the whole idea is take back the streets, take back the workplace. Go to your workplace and tell them you want a prayer room, you want a prayer time.
So this is the antidote to Christians who feel as though they are being cancelled. You're saying, no, we're not. We're going to show that we're still here.
Precisely. At Christmas, nobody can say you can't do what you want to do or sing carols. And even during the year, please find a rhythm and a way by which you can meet other Christians in your workplace and pray. And we're not against anything. It's what we are for. It's who we are. And we're here to love people. We're here to, God so love the world, love your neighbor. The essence of the gospel is love first. It's not judgment.
Because we've still got some sort of pictures up in the house, haven't we? You know, we've got Christmas, we've got Easter.
Yes.
So have you got anything planned for Easter? You know, don't want to put too much on one person.
I know, but we're working with others who are taking that space. And
Yes.
let the festivals help Christians regain their muscle memory and what they've forgotten. So the amnesia needs to be cured from the church. And if we can remember who we were 200 years ago, 100 years ago, what we need to be now.
And you know, just countering the specific charge that Christianity brings a kind of guilt, and you know, talking about sin is negative. We have to get that message back there so that people can see the message of salvation from sin.
Precisely.
So in other words, you're not just, as it were, window dressing the Christian faith. You go for the heart of it.
Yeah. Because at Christmas we tell people, put Christ back in Christmas.
Yeah.
It's Christmas for a reason.
Yeah.
And there's a gospel message. And the gospel message is God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. And that whosoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. So the gospel has to be preached. And it's the Holy Spirit that convicts of sin. Yes. We don't have to bash people over the head. We just have to preach the gospel. The gospel does what it says on the tin. You don't have to add to it or subtract from it.
And it's wonderfully positive. It's not repressive. It's not medieval.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can have a wonderful, liberated life. So you're not retiring yet, then, John?
Oh my goodness! No. I still have a few good decades ahead of me. Yes,
it's such a blessing that, you know, wherever you had that Macedonian call.
Thank you.
To help, you know, in this land, that we can see a future.
I feel the collaboration of the church from the global south and the church in the west, bringing our strengths, and even those from the Americas and the Far East. Many of them are here. We need to come together and unite at the cross. And if we bring our strengths together, we can heal the land.
Amen. Bless you.
Thank you.
I've really enjoyed this. It's actually refreshing.
Thank you.
Because you can see it all going down, but then, as you say, shine the light and you can see something else emerging. God bless you.
Thank you.
Dr. Jonathan Oloyede. Bless you. And we'll see you next time we go face to face.